This is only the third interstellar object. It's not like they come every day.
It's also potentially big, like 20 kilometers in diameter. And it has this unusually fine-tuned trajectory. All of these make it extremely rare. The way I see it is, it's like a blind date from interstellar space, and we shouldn't assume that we know the nature of the other side.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I've got some exciting news to share. Our brand new website has just been launched and is live at paulbegleypodcast.com. This is now your one-stop hub for everything podcast related. So instead of scouring all over the internet looking for links to the show, you can stream every episode, watch our latest YouTube videos, check out our guest directory to see who's been on the show, and even read our brand new blog for extra content. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review right on the site. There's no login hassle needed to do this. Everything's right there. It's easy to access, mobile friendly, and it's built for you. So while you're listening today, take a second to check it out. paulbegleypodcast.com. Now back to the show.
Welcome, everybody, to a powerful, and I mean this, a powerful interview. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Avi Loeb with us today. He is the leading, I would think, probably the leading expert as an astrophysicist out of Harvard University, and we are just so glad. Also, my son, Paul Begley Jr. is with me as well, and so let's just bring both these guys in and get ready. Hang on. Hold on, everybody. It's I don't know, warning, planet Earth. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, here we go. Dr. Avi Loeb and Paul Begley Jr.
Today, we're joined by one of the most fascinating minds in science and space exploration, Dr. Avi Loeb. If you just type it in right now, you can probably find at least 50 articles within the last 10 hours with his name in there. He's a Harvard astrophysicist, best-selling author and founder of the Galileo Project, which is a bold initiative searching for evidence of extraterrestrial technology. Known for his groundbreaking work on interstellar objects like Uma and his willingness to challenge conventional thinking, Avi has a gift for explaining cosmic mysteries in ways everyone can understand, which is very helpful for myself and Pastor. So we're excited to talk with him today about his latest research, including 3I Atlas, and his thoughts on UFO disclosure and what it means for humanity. Dr. Loeb, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to join you.
So, Dr. Loeb, I wanted to start because the 3I Atlas is a huge topic, and we are definitely going to get into that today. But I wanted to ask a little bit about your background so we can kind of understand your thinking and methodology to actually implementing the mathematics of astrophysics in there. I was reading your book, Extraterrestrial, where you had mentioned that before you got into the line of work that you're in, you were really interested in philosophy, and you even thought about going back and just being a philosopher. I kind of see a lot of that in your work because you're asking these big, higher level questions that need to be answered and explained. So I was hoping you could give us a little bit of your background before we get started.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, everything goes back to my childhood where I grew up on a farm, was very much connected to nature and interested in the big questions. I used to go to the hills of the village and read philosophy books because these are the existential questions that give meaning to our life. We live for 100 years at best, kind of order of magnitude, and that's a relatively short time. And most of the time, we just don't attend to the important questions. And I was always focused on the big picture. But the circumstances, since I was born in Israel, there was obligatory military service, but I preferred to serve thinking rather than running. And I was good at physics, so I ended up getting a PhD at age 24 during my military service. And because I led a project that was funded by President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, that brought me to Washington, D.C. quite often. And in one of the visits, I visited also Princeton, where I was offered a 5-year fellowship at the Institute for Advanced Study, where Albert Einstein was several decades earlier. And that brought me into astrophysics. And eventually I got a faculty position at Harvard University, was tenured after 3 years. And so at that point, I realized that even though it was an arranged marriage to astrophysics, I couldn't really decline the opportunities that were given to me. Actually, I'm married to my true love, because the universe offers a glimpse at the very fundamental questions that we have, and I can pursue it using the scientific method. And what you find is most practitioners of astrophysics and cosmology, the study of the universe, they are focused on a very narrow niche that they are good at, technically speaking, but they don't look at the big picture. And so it gave me an advantage relative to my colleagues and a different perspective on what we are doing. And it also gives me some resilience to criticism from my colleagues, because when they don't see the big picture, they often miss on very important questions. For example, is there a smarter kid on our cosmic block? That seems to me like an extremely important question, because the public cares about it. The public funds science. It's very reasonable to expect that things like us exist elsewhere. And I had a visit actually by a group of scholars from the organization Christianity Today. And the question that was asked was, if we find extraterrestrials, intelligent beings from another star, would it have any impact on our religious beliefs? So here is an interesting big question. And my answer to that was, I have 2 daughters. And when the second one was born, it didn't take away any of my love to the first one. So imagining that God is a parent that can attend only to one child is very limiting. And, I can imagine that we have siblings near other stars. The only issue with that is that some of them might be more accomplished than we are. And as a result, we will feel jealous about it if they have better technology, better science, better accomplishments altogether. They cooperate with each other rather than kill each other the way people do on Earth, and they just seem to be more intelligent. We might be a bit jealous, but I don't see any problem for the belief in God, because presumably that, they all came under, similar circumstances, just like many children, family, it comes about. And so they actually were very happy with this answer. But this is just one of the questions that is not often raised in the context of astronomy. And frankly, my colleagues are really obsessed about with the search for microbes. These are the primitive forms of life, because they say, well, they're probably everywhere. We see a lot of houses similar to our own house, our own home, the Earth-Sun system. We think that there are billions of those systems in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And so, my colleagues agree with that, but they say, well, but, microbes came very early on Earth, therefore they should be everywhere. We should search for them first. And I say, well, if you look at the houses similar to yours on the street, of course, there might be a lot of microbes in these houses, but frankly, I'm bored with microbes. It doesn't give me any excitement, and I would much rather learn from an intelligent resident of any of these houses. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. But, in the past, I worked on questions like, what is the scientific version of the story of Genesis that you find in the Old Testament? And now we have data from the Webb telescope that gives us some glimpse at the early stages in the evolution of the universe. I also worked on black holes, and we I was the founding director of the Black Hole Initiative that was initially funded by the Templeton Foundation. And so, every decade or so, I define a path of research that is not often popular, and nevertheless, it ends up eventually being appreciated. And now it's the search for alien intelligence. That's what I'm focused on, and we can talk more about it.
Avi, I'd like to bring into effect, I love the answer you gave, because I've been asked this many times. Could there be extraterrestrial? Could there be other life forms? And from a theological position, a lot of my colleagues would say no. And if you believe that, if you believe in aliens, then you're saying you're denying God. That's what they'll say to me. And my answer is no. I see it as God. We are limited God. If you think if God made a massive universe that has no end, no beginning, no end, then why would we be the only little planet on the whole thing that he cares about? It just don't make sense. So there's the odds are if God's unlimited, which he is, there could be 100 Earths out there. There could be 1,000 of them. Why limit? And so your question about saying, I don't want to just hunt for microbes, why don't we start looking for potential others, human species or other type of species? God made a lot of species you put on this planet, no doubt about that. Yet we all have the same kind of circulatory systems. We all have the same, we're reproductive. We have the same kind of format, even though we're all these different species. So why couldn't that be for everywhere? So I'm going to say to you, I agree with you that I'm not going to limit God. I am not going to limit God.
And here is another tidbit that is often missed, which is I don't see science as being in any conflict with religion. In my view, if the best expression of love to someone is trying to know as much as possible about that someone. That's the best expression of love. You don't want to miss any detail. You want to know everything about the subject of your love. And if you really love God, then you want to know everything there is about the universe. And, science allows you to do that with the very best instruments that humans developed, including the Webb telescope recently and others. And why wouldn't you want all the details about the universe? That would only improve your sense of awe as to what is out there. If you are ignorant, then you can't really appreciate the amazing beauty that the universe shows.
Yeah, and I'd like to just throw one more thing in, Paul, if I could for a minute, and that is the Galileo project. When I interviewed you, Avi, just after you had come back from Papua New Guinea and had just dragged the bottom of the ocean there and had found those spheres. I think at the time you might have had 100, and now I think it's way more than that. So
now we have 850. There will be a Netflix documentary coming out in early 2026 that will give all the details, and you might enjoy that. I'm also finishing a book. Actually, today I went over the last chapter of it. With MIT Press, describing that expedition. So, in the last 9 years or so, I started thinking about the question of, are we alone and what is else out there? And I established the Galileo project. We can talk more about it. We're establishing 3 observatories looking at the sky. And then also, the expedition was another initiative that was quite exciting. And now we are getting to a new era of finding interstellar objects every few months with the Rubin telescope in Chile. And I'll be glad to give more details about the latest discovery of 3I Atlas.
Absolutely, Paul.
Yeah, so Dr. Loeb, we are going to jump straight into 3I Atlas, but I wanted to ask you just a little bit more, just so people can kind of understand where you're coming from. I feel like the line of work that you're in would, promote this idea of being open-minded for exploration. Why would you be looking up and, through multi-million, billion-dollar telescopes to see what is out there if you're not actually curious about it. And then the discoveries that you do get, why would you, come up with a different explanation which is already known instead of going further into the research?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I know there is some resistance among your colleagues and the astrophysicists in the community, because you do take unfortunately, you do take some negative press as well for your work. I wanted to ask you about how do you balance that, this scientific skepticism and then open-minded exploration, such as yourself with your research?
Yeah, I approach it just the way that the basketball coaches approach playing basketball. They say to the team, keep your eyes on the ball, not on the audience. So I don't have any presence on social media. I don't care how many likes I get. I'm trying to do what sounds like common sense.
Right.
And unfortunately, common sense is not common in academia. One reason I search for higher intelligence in interstellar space is because I don't often find it in academia. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that people are following the wrong principles. They're attached to their ego rather than trying to figure out nature. And what does that mean? That means that they avoid risks. They don't want to be wrong, and therefore they would always argue that what we see reflects what we already know. Because if you were to say, oh, maybe this anomaly represents new physics, new phenomena that we haven't noticed before, then you might be proven wrong eventually, and they try to avoid that as much as possible. So any object showing in the sky that comes from outside the solar system would immediately get cataloged as a comet, even if it's not a comet. Why? Because we've seen a lot of comets, we've seen a lot of rocks within the solar system. So if you argue that, nobody would blame you for speculating, you will not take any risk. And this way, you just shove any anomalies under the carpet of traditional thinking. It's just safer. And then you maintain your status, you maintain your echo chamber of repeating things we know from the past. And that's the best way to get more funding, to get more appreciation among your peers. If you go out, if you think outside the box and you deviate from the beaten path, you are taking a risk because it's not at all clear where this path would lead. And most people try to avoid it. So that's obviously understandable. But I also, I wrote a paper just a few weeks ago about the question of why many experts have this resistance to changing the dogma, changing the paradigm. And there are three components to it. One is cognitive, because experts are used to past knowledge and they base their self-esteem on past knowledge. So when they see something that doesn't quite line up with what they expected, they have what is called a cognitive dissonance, meaning that they get upset and they want to dismiss it and remove it from the table. And one way to do that is remove the messenger, not just the message. And so they want to get rid of it because it says that what we knew in the past is not complete. And they base their own stature on that. So that's called cognitive dissonance, very common among experts when they see anomalies. And that has to do with the cognition, the way they think about the problem. Then there is a societal effect where they always group into a kind of a herd mentality. A lot of people, they can easily attack and dismiss a single individual that deviates from the groupthink because they're much more powerful. With many of them, they can, for example, block papers from getting published in scientific journal. They can ridicule the person on a personal basis on social media. They can attack the students or postdocs that work with that person. And, I witnessed all of these, and they do it as a collective, as a group. They're much more powerful. They have more people. And in this way, they can easily suppress the voice of any particular person that wants to deviate from, what is already known. And fortunately, I'm not that vulnerable to these people because I have tenure, and the whole purpose of tenure in academia is to allow job security when you come up with an innovative idea. But I see that as a threat to innovation because they basically discourage young people from thinking in an original fashion, innovating, and they want everyone to follow the path that they took in the past. And that's unfortunately suppressing innovation in science, which is a very bad thing. Also in academia in general, you want multiple opinions. You want to explore new territories so that maybe you will discover something new. If people are afraid to explore new territories, we will not discover anything. And that may be one reason why progress is very slow in science, because of this groupthink. And you see it in many different ways. I mean, we saw it during COVID-19, where the idea that the virus came from a lab was defined as racist, even though it's a completely legitimate scientific question. You know, the virus came from somewhere. We can check the facts and decide whether it came from a lab leak in Wuhan, a virology lab that was actually working on the SARS viruses and doing gain of function experiments. So it's completely reasonable to check, versus came from the wet market that is a 45-minute drive from there. And it's a completely scientific question to figure out where it came from, you know. So nevertheless, societal forces entered the discussion and marginalized those who tried to check the lab leak hypothesis, which by now is actually more popular in government. And I see these societal forces as basically suppressing innovation, suppressing the truth, finding the truth in science, which is really bad. You know, this is not a nuance. This is a major threat. I would regard it as anti-science. And having that embedded in scholarship is really bad. And it's really difficult to get innovative papers published and funded and innovative research going. And so that's one of the reasons that I insist on making my voice heard, because I'm sure that I'm not alone. You can ask a lot of young people how much scrutiny they get if they wanted to deviate from what the adults in the room are telling them. And you would think, okay, well, that sounds like a cult. It doesn't sound like science, but unfortunately, that's the reality in many subjects currently. And you may say, oh, well, maybe the mainstream is conservative for a good reason because they never make a mistake. No, that's not the case. You know, we don't know, for example, what most of the matter in the universe is. 85% of the matter is called dark matter. We don't know what it is. And for about 40 years, since I started astrophysics, there were very popular ideas in the mainstream that required investment of billions of dollars to test them, that the dark matter is made of supersymmetric particles that are weakly interacting, and billions of dollars were spent. We haven't found them. We haven't found supersymmetry either. And these were ideas for which prizes, awards, honors were given to people who suggested them. But nevertheless, they turned out to be wrong. Okay, so when the mainstream makes mistakes, you ask yourself, isn't it much better to allow many flowers bloom at the same time, like allow other ideas that are not within the mainstream because maybe they're right, rather than the mainstream idea? You look at particle physics and you see that for 40 years, the string theory prevailed. And that was the idea that we live in extra spatial dimensions, yet this theory ended up not giving any definite predictions that can be tested against experiments for 40 years. And you ask yourself, why is it that it was popular, that you know, most of the community focused on that in theoretical physics, when at the end of after 40 years, we are not in any place better to figure out how quantum mechanics and gravity are unified. So what I'm trying to say is that the mainstream often speculates in directions that do not appear to be correct, okay? And so the only way for us to have the scientific endeavor more efficient is to allow multiple voices and not ridicule. Now, the idea that we are not alone, that something like us exists because we know of billions of Earth-Sun systems might exist in the Milky Way galaxy, like this idea is not speculative, as speculative as extra dimensions, as speculative as the nature of dark matter. It's not speculative because we exist right here and we see circumstances that led to our existence in billions of other places just within the Milky Way galaxy. And then there are a trillion galaxies like it in the observable volume of the universe. So just based on that, you would argue this is not speculative. This is a reasonable proposition to test by collecting evidence. And for some reason, this is being ridiculed and pushed back against. And, the strange thing about the most recent developments that we will talk about, 3i Atlas, has to do with the possibility that we might be visited by, a spacecraft from another civilization. And that is being ridiculed by the people who searched for 60 years for a radio signal from another civilization far away. Now, I'm not saying that they wasted their time. They haven't found anything for 60 years. That's not the issue. The issue is that they insist that searching for a spacecraft that enters the solar system sounds unreasonable. And they try to argue as strongly as possible that 3i Atlas is not that kind of a thing. They're trying to ridicule any notion that it might not be a comet. And I ask myself, why would they do that? After all, they dedicated their careers to the search for technological signatures that they didn't end up finding. And here is another method. The method they used is similar to waiting for a phone call. You're waiting for a radio signal to arrive. And the method that I'm suggesting is checking your mailbox for a package that arrived in the mail. It's a different method. And both of them can tell you that there might be other residents in houses down your street. So you find this, this unfortunate phenomena in science where people just block innovative ideas. And, the thing that bothers me is that without seeking the evidence, we will never find it. You see, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to argue, it's an extraordinary claim to imagine something like us elsewhere, and therefore we don't have any extraordinary evidence to support it, so we will not seek the evidence. Of course, if you don't seek the evidence, you will never find it, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What I argue is that let's invest as much money in the search for intelligent beings as we do in the search for microbes. Why should we invest all the money, more than $10 billion, in the search for microbes, which is the mainstream of astronomy right now, astrobiology, and nearly $0 federal dollars being allocated to the search for alien intelligence? That's the reality we live in. That makes no sense to me and to many other people in the public.
Avi, that was a great explanation to why you are so focused on outside the box. We have the same thing in theology, believe me. There's hermeneutics, there's this standards that everyone says has to be. And if you think outside the box, wait a minute, what if it could be this? A lot of folks don't even want to consider it. And that's what I like about you. You want to consider it. So can we go there? This 3i Atlas. Can you explain to us why you think it's not a comet? Is there its speed? Does it have a tail? I mean, what's going on with it? Give us some what you've already observed and why you're so concerned. I've read in a lot of articles out on the news now that you're saying world leaders need to take a look at this. Don't let time run out. Explain.
Right. Well, the fun thing about doing science is that you can ask any question. Questions should not be censored. And then the answer is provided by evidence, by data. That's the scientific method. You follow what nature tells you. You shouldn't assume that you know the answer in advance. And 3i Atlas is the third interstellar object, meaning an object that came from outside the solar system and was discovered over the past 8 years. The first one was Oumuamua in 2017. And that was really a peculiar object about the size of a football field that was most likely flat and was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force without showing any evidence for cometary evaporation. So it didn't look like a comet, yet something else pushed it. It was not the evaporation that pushed it. And I suggested that it was a technological relic, but we didn't get enough data on it. And then in 2019, we saw a real comet that came from interstellar space. It was named Borisov after the person who discovered it. And now we discovered the third one on July 1st, 2025, and it was a 0.5 meter telescope in Chile called Atlas that discovered it. So this one is called 3 for the third object, I for interstellar, and then Atlas for the telescope that found it. And as soon as it was discovered, I realized the object is relatively bright. And that means that if it's a solid object, it has to be 20 kilometers in diameter. And that's bigger than Manhattan Island, twice as big as the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. And it's just such a giant rock that I created that, there is not enough material, rocky material in interstellar space to give us such an object, such a big rock, over the past decade or so. It would take 10,000 years before such a big rock can be delivered, even if you package all the rocky material in interstellar space into 20-kilometer packages. And so that immediately raised an alarm for me that maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not a natural object, but it's actually an artificial object that was designed to approach the inner part of the solar system. And as a result, it has nothing to do with the reservoir of rocky material in interstellar space. It targeted our environment and came here. And indeed, we haven't seen a cometary tail behind this object. The Hubble Space Telescope image shows some glow ahead of it, but not behind it. And it's not clear what this glow represents. I calculated that even if it's a cloud of dust that is maintained for 6 months, it's only a layer that is 1 millimeter thick that needs to evaporate during that 6 months to supply all the material that is producing this glow for 6 months. So it could be just dirt on the surface of the object that has nothing to do with the fact that it's a comet. And then the question is, what is this object? And it looks like the object selected a very fine-tuned path through the solar system. It actually lies in the plane of the planets around the sun. That's called the ecliptic plane. And this object, 3I Atlas, enters within 5 degrees of that plane. So as a result of that, it can pass very close to many planets. So the chance of it being in the plane of the planets around the sun is 1 in 500. And then even if you assume that trajectory, the path that it takes, the timing of its arrival is very fine-tuned to come close to Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. And the chance of that happening is actually 1 in 20,000 for it to come close to all these planets at the right time, at the right place.
1 in 20,000 is the odds of this? Oh, okay.
Passing so, because you realize that Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, they orbit around the sun, and this object is passing through the solar system at a very high speed of 60 kilometers per second, much higher than their orbital speed. Yet it arrives to the orbit of Mars exactly when Mars is near it, and it arrives then to the orbit of Venus exactly when Venus is near it, and then it arrives to the orbit of Jupiter exactly when Jupiter is near it. And arranging for these coincidences in one trajectory is 1 in 20,000 chance.
Wow.
And moreover, when it arrives closest to the sun, that would be on October 29th, 2025, the Earth would be on the opposite side of the sun. And it seems as if it wants to avoid us. We won't be able to observe it at that time. And getting closest to the sun is the point in time when it can do a maneuver, taking advantage of the sun's gravity. This is called gravitational assist, or a maneuver, Oberth maneuver. And we use it for spacecraft. And we won't be able to observe it if it does a maneuver like that at the best point along the path, or it sends some mini probes to visit the planets at that point. And also, finally, it came from a very special direction in the sky that is crowded by plenty of stars, the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And that's why it took a while for us to recognize it, because it was confused as a star when it was far away. And altogether, this trajectory that it follows is very fine-tuned. And I just say maybe this trajectory was designed by some intelligence that sent this object. And my colleagues are saying, no, it could be a random trajectory, even though the chance for that is really small. And they also insist that it's a comet, even though it doesn't have a cometary tail. This is just like claiming that an animal is a zebra, even if it doesn't show stripes. The dust that we see, the glow around it is very small, very compact cloud of dust that could be just dirt on the surface of the object. And that was ablated as it came closer to the sun. And there is no evidence for molecules of carbon-based combinations that we find around other comets. So there is no evidence for gas, no water. There were claims that water was seen, but these are, I explain in my essays on medium.com that these are not substantiated by the data. They are within the noise. And so my point is, if we don't see gas that is often around comets near this one, and the plume of dust is so small and weak, and it's only preceding the object without lagging behind it, it doesn't look like the typical comet you would expect. But I should explain that the perspective of my colleagues is very different. For example, Oumuamua definitely, they agree, definitely was not a regular familiar comet, but they call it dark comet, meaning it's a comet with an invisible cometary tail. So it's just like the story of Hans Christian Andersen that's, where the kid says the emperor has no clothes. And the adults in the room are telling the kid, no, the emperor has clothes. You just can't see them. They are beautiful. And so the same story here, that I'm the kid and the comet experts are playing the adults in the room, and they say, no, Oumuamua had a beautiful tail. You just couldn't see it. And, I respond just to what I see. And the same here, they repeatedly announce it as a comet and ignore the fact that the glow is in front of it instead of on the back of it. But we will hopefully know, as soon as it comes closer to the sun, within a month or so, we will know if it's a comet or something else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Dr. Loeb, I just wanted to share, this is an article that you published actually in July. This was the conclusion of 3i Atlas as well. So it goes to, what we had been discussing earlier as well. And then also, if again, like I had mentioned, if you go and you type in Dr. Avi Loeb, and then you kind of see all of the sensational articles written about him. But if you actually go and read the published articles that he's writing, we strongly emphasize that this paper is largely, I can't even say that word, but it's pretty much a thought exercise.
Right. Yeah. If you also listen to my interviews, and I appeared on, just today, I had 5 interviews on television in international, in various countries, and on podcasts and so forth. I always say the things that I just said, and that we need to get more data to figure out what's going on. But journalists, reporters, they want to get as many clickbaits as possible, and as a result, they make sensational headlines that do not reflect what I say. Many of them don't even speak with me. So then it gives an easy target to those critics to say, Avi Loeb said this and that is exaggerate, that makes no sense. But I didn't say that. It's the reporters that said that. And so they create this fictitious story that then gets digested on social media, which I'm not a partner with. And as a result, my views are displayed in an incorrect way and exaggerated in ways that are not reliable. But this is not what I say. So by now, I should tell you that I have a lot of followers that are reading what I say. So, for example, on medium.com, I checked this morning, there are 200,000 views of the essays that I wrote just in the first 10 days of August 2025. That is a large crowd that is reading my my writings. I mean, I'm not, it's not a tweet. It's not
Yeah.
a short sentence. I'm each of these is a full essay that talks about the science of Three-Eye Atlas. And so I get hundreds of thousands of people reading my essays since the discovery of Three-Eye Atlas on July 1st. By now, it's probably close to 1 million, over the past month and a half. And I also appear on many, many different podcasts and television interviews. So if you really want to get to the source, just watch these or read my writings and ignore altogether the reporters. I mean, it's completely irrelevant. By the way, I once spoke with the editor of the New York Times, and because they distorted what I said, and I told the editor, look, if that's what you're doing about science, why should I believe anything you say about politics?
Great point. Let me ask a question too, because we do have a 90-second clip of you on a TED Talk where it's really good that we might show here in a minute. But I want to ask a question. All right, this object that's coming through our solar system, 1 in 20,000 chance that it's going to go past these 3 different planets in our solar system. That is crazy right there. No tail, all of these things. Do we have any spacecrafts or probes that we could send in that direction, Avi? Is there still time?
Excellent. Excellent question. Yeah. So because it was discovered in July 2025, it's too late to send a rocket from Earth that will intercept it during its passage in the inner solar system. Simply because it would move when it's closest to the sun, it would move at 98 kilometers per second relative to Earth, because it comes on a retrograde orbit, which is opposite to the motion of the Earth. So we won't be able to reach it, to intercept it. But I realized about 10 days ago that, in fact, there is a spacecraft that is currently orbiting Jupiter, and it was planned to crash into Jupiter in mid-September 2025. That's the Juno mission. It's called Juno because that's the name of the wife of Jupiter in Roman mythology.
All right.
Anyway, the mission was started in 2011, and they were planning to end it in mid-September 2025. And I said, well, instead of just giving it a push into Jupiter so that it will end its life there, give it a push away from Jupiter. And we calculated that it could potentially, if it had enough fuel, could intercept Three-Eye Atlas when it comes close to Jupiter in mid-March 2026. So if the push is in September 2025, it will reach the path of Three-Eye Atlas in mid-March 2026 when it comes close to Jupiter. And that would be a perfect opportunity to learn more about this object. Now, the fundamental question is how much fuel is left. And I'm in contact with the Juno team, and we are looking into it. At the very least, even if there is little fuel, Juno can come closer to the path of Three-Eye Atlas using the remaining fuel. It could definitely get within 25 million kilometers from it, according to our calculations. And actually, a day after I posted my paper, I had a phone call from Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted an update about Three-Eye Atlas, and I gave it to her. I mentioned also the opportunity to use Juno, and she volunteered to write a letter to the head of NASA, asking NASA to look, encouraging them to consider the possibility of using Juno to probe Three-Eye Atlas. And I hope they will do it. We don't have a lot of time, but I hope that they will extend the mission by at least 6 months. That will cost about $15 million to do, but it could give us a glimpse from a close-by location of what is Three-Eye Atlas. It will gather information that we cannot obtain at the distance of the Earth from Three-Eye Atlas.
I mean, if you ask me, here we are. We have an opportunity. It's only $15 million. They blow that in 15 minutes in Washington.
Yes, that's true.
And you're not going to get another. This is only the third interstellar object. It's not like they come every day. So
it's also potentially big, like 20 kilometers in diameter, and it has this unusually fine-tuned trajectory. All of these make it extremely rare. And the way I see it is, it's like a blind date from interstellar space, and we shouldn't assume that we know the nature of the other side until we examine it. Yeah,
I'm hoping and praying that they take your advice, and I'm hoping the Congresswoman is able to get NASA. It's just common sense that this.
Yeah, she definitely has her heart in the right place, and I'm grateful to her support.
We'll be watching, Paul.
That's an interesting thing that I was thinking about as well. Is along the lines of the Galileo project. I don't know if the work you were doing with the Congresswoman actually is part of the Galileo project, but it's interesting to me that you would say that you don't have access, or you may, I don't know for sure, to speak with the head of NASA about an opportunity like this to present that.
Well, currently the head of NASA is temporarily Duffy, the transportation secretary.
Oh, Sean Duffy. Yeah,
Sean Duffy. I don't have access to him, but I've never met him. But I hope in the future. And if he wants to chat, I will be delighted, of course.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can help.
That was one of the questions I was thinking about asking you as well, is funding, because I've heard you talk about funding on the TED Talk we'll probably show here in just a minute. For the Galileo project, do you have any sort of governmental grants or funding in that direction? Or
not from government. I'm funded by private donors, people who are excited by the mission of the research. Of course, we would, that's at the level of a few $1 million. We would benefit greatly if the funding level was enhanced to be comparable to that of the search for microbes. That's all I'm saying. We should hedge our bets. We should, and the reason is simple. Even though microbes might be far more abundant, it might be easier to detect the signatures of intelligent beings out there. Just think about the analogy with houses on the street. If they have microbes, good luck detecting evidence for those microbes from a distance. It's not easy. Right. And on the other hand, if there are even a small number of residents in those houses, you could see what they're doing. You might detect a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. You might see them moving around or knocking on your door or doing something. So it's a completely different search method, and it might prove more effective at demonstrating that life exists out there. We should hedge our bets because we don't know which method would give results first. And also, it's similar to Pascal's wager, that I'm saying, 3I Atlas may be just a comet, but it may also be technological. That's a possibility. And, the consequences of it being technological are huge for the future of humanity. It will inspire us to come together, perhaps, instead of fighting each other on this planet, because there will be some threat from the sky that will bring us together on Earth. And it might inspire us to develop new technologies and go into interstellar space, something that we haven't really developed much in our current space plans. Altogether, it would have a huge impact on humanity, and therefore we cannot dismiss that possibility casually. We have to explore and check whether it's a natural object or not. I actually proposed last month a new scale that is now called the Loeb scale, where between 0 and 10, where 0 is an interstellar object that is definitely natural. And there is no doubt about it because you see the cometary tail, just like Borisov, the one I mentioned. And 10 would be a definitely technological object. Of course, if we find any object to maneuver, as if it has an engine or to create artificial lights, or have some unusual shape or transmit signals, we would know that it's 10. And at that point, policymakers will have to come together with scientists and decide how to respond. It's very different from getting a radio signal from thousands of light years away, in which case you have plenty of time to respond. There is no urgency. But if you have a visitor to your backyard, you have to decide about the intent of the visitor in order to figure out how to respond to that visitor. It's imminent, it's next door, that visitor may come into your home. Okay, so it's a completely different situation than the search for an extraterrestrial intelligence encountered in the past, when those scientists were looking for radio signals. And of course, if you do find such a visitor next door, you would need to use psychologists that would convey the message to the public without creating panic, without the economic meltdown. Because imagine this Object 3I Atlas making a maneuver that cannot be explained other than a technological maneuver. The stock market may crash. And we are talking a lot about the existential threat from artificial intelligence, from maybe climate change, from an asteroid impact, but we don't discuss the existential threat from alien technology. And that should be taken into account, given that the Rubin telescope may find an interstellar object every few months in the coming decade. And we should check each and every object, whether it's natural, in the form of a comet or an asteroid, or perhaps artificial, in which case the implications could be huge.
Wow. I think you explained it very well, that it's common sense that if someone's in your backyard, you might want to go figure out who they are and what the intent is. And
exactly,
I hope that they will go ahead and push Juno in that direction. I really, really, really hope they would do that. But Paul, you've got that TED Talk. Should we play that?
Yeah, let me just pull it up here on the screen.
The most exciting endeavor that I was involved in is an expedition to the Pacific Ocean near Papua New Guinea to look for the materials from this meteor that I described before. And the US Space Command issued a letter to NASA confirming at the 99.999% that this object indeed originated from outside the solar system based on its high speed. It was moving faster than 95% of all stars in the vicinity of the sun. It exploded in the lower atmosphere, about 90 kilometers away from Manus Island in Papua New Guinea. And that meant that the object had material strength tougher than even iron meteorites. And so I led an expedition in June 2023. You can see the team on the ship that was fittingly called Silver Star. And we used a sled with magnets on both sides to search for droplets left over from the explosion of this meteor. And at the bottom left, you see the filming crew of Netflix that are preparing a documentary about this research. And the director asked me, Avi, it looks like you are running, because I was jogging at sunrise, as I often do on land, for a few miles. And he said, are you running away from something or towards something? And I said, both. I'm running away from some of my colleagues who have strong opinions without seeking evidence. And I'm running towards a higher intelligence in interstellar space. Now, we used this sled and collected magnetic particles from the ocean floor about a mile deep. And then I brought them to my colleagues at Harvard University. They look like metallic spheres, very distinct from the background of sand in which they were collected. And my colleague at Harvard, Stein Jacobson, is a world-renowned geochemist. He used the electron microprobe, a mass spectrometer in his laboratory. The person on the other side of me in this picture is a summer intern, Sophie Bergstrom, who found most of our molten droplets. And so I called her the spheral hunter. And most of our spherals were actually of a type familiar from the solar system, but about 10% of them looked unusual, and they had a chemical composition very different from solar system materials. They had abundances of elements like beryllium, lanthanum, uranium that are up to a factor of 1,000 more than found in solar system materials. They were not from the Earth, not from the Moon, not from Mars, not from asteroids. And so now the question arises, was this a rock from another star? And of course, one possibility is that there was a natural process that produced it. For example, most stars are dwarf stars, 10% of the mass of the sun, and they're 100 times denser than the sun. And so if you bring a planet like the Earth close to them, they spaghettify the planet, make a stream of rocks that could be ejected at a speed similar to that of this meteor. But it's also possible that this object was of artificial origin, in which case, if we look for bigger pieces of the object, we might find a gadget with buttons on it. And I asked students in my class, if we find such a gadget, should we press a button? Now, some of my critics argue.
Sorry.
Should we press the button? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, by the way, this question applies also to something like 3i Atlas. If it happens to be technological and we design a mission to land on it, what should we do if we find the buttons on it? Yeah.
It's very true. Very true.
Yes, I just wanted to share that because I thought that was really interesting because Pastor, you and I were talking about that. You're like, have you heard about this with Avi? I was like, oh man, I'm trying to pack in all kinds of research on Avi. But I thought that was interesting just to see kind of the things that are coming out of the Galileo project. And again, it goes back to Avi, your research method and always being curious and questioning. I think that's really important. I used to teach high school math for a very short time. And the thing that I kept telling the kids in there, I said, it's really not even about the math, honestly. It's about, are you willing to try? Like, it's okay to make a mistake because making a mistake, you can actually learn from it.
Exactly.
And I hear you saying this about, your colleagues and a lot of the mainstream science where people are, they're afraid to come out and make suggestions and
it's all, they're also trying to show off very often. And if that argues that you should not take risks if you want to show off, you want to be on solid ground. And that's one reason to always resist change. That's really the problem. They are attached to their ego more than to nature. I see that as the root of the problem. If you are attached to yourself, then you will do virtue signaling. I mean, you see that on campuses very often where people say they really care about a problem in society. They really care about it. So they raise signs or they put signs in their backyard and just to demonstrate that they really care about the problem. That's not really caring about the problem. That's caring about your image in the eyes of your peers. Okay, you want to show that you to your peers as if you care about. But if you really cared about it, you would try to solve the problem. You would actually dedicate a lot of time and effort and resources to going places and doing the work needed to solve the problem. Okay, so instead of showing off, on the ship of this expedition was a relatively old person, 85, maybe now he's more, by now he's 88 years old, Art Wright. He was a commander of a destroyer during the Vietnam War. And he would not speak much. Everything he said was true, and he would often solve problems without telling us. He would just solve it. He didn't want to show off. He didn't want us to appreciate what he's doing. He just solved the problems. And that is very similar to my father. When I grew up on a farm, he was task-oriented. If there is something to resolve, he would do it, and he would speak only when it's needed, when he can't solve it on his own. And I really appreciate very deeply such people because it's not about them. It's not about their ego. What you find on social media are young people who are always trying to show off, to tell their tribe that they care about something, or to ridicule someone that doesn't belong to their tribe. It's all about themselves. Has nothing to do with problems that they claim they care about. They're not trying to solve those problems. They're not sacrificing anything that belongs to them for that purpose. And that's exactly the opposite attitude to the one displayed by my father or Art Wright on the expedition. And I find that to be a thread for why also many scientists do not take risks, because that would endanger their status. And they are attached to themselves, they're attached to their ego. They don't innovate because they base their ego on what is already known. And so that's the root of the problem.
And here's a question for you then, Avi. Recently, there's been these congressional hearings,
Yes.
and we got guys that are whistleblowers, okay, and they say they've seen this and they've seen that.
Yes. Yes.
What do you think about that? I mean,
Yeah.
have you had any dialogue with these guys?
So I'll give you an anecdote. I was in Washington, D.C. At the end of April, the last day of April. I was invited to visit the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is the office established in the Pentagon by Congress in response to the reports from the Director of National Intelligence about unidentified anomalous phenomena. And so, I was sitting there for a few hours, and I asked them, okay, you've looked at these reports for a few years, and what's your verdict? Did you see anything unusual? And they said, yeah, we have access to everything, all the classified information within government we have access to, and we haven't found anything unusual. That's what they said. There are some FBI reports, but they are not substantiated by data, they said. And then a day later, on May 1st, 2025, I went to Congress to brief Congress about my work in the Galileo project. And next to me, after I spoke first, and then after that was Eric Davis. He said that he worked in government and he has knowledge that government is in possession of a dozen spacecraft that were retrieved in crash sites, and that they have extraterrestrial pilots of various types, 4 different types. And then I thought to myself, okay, it can't be that both Eric Davis and the ARRO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, are right. One of them is wrong. And I couldn't make up my mind who is wrong, because none of them presented the data to me, okay, the evidence. And so I'm completely torn between stories that people tell me. When you hear about a car accident, you hear different people give you a very different reports. We know that in the courtroom, some people get exonerated after the DNA tests show that they are not at fault, even though the witnesses argue that they are at fault. And so very often when people tell you something, you don't know whether to trust it. And I'm torn apart between the different versions of the story. And what I would like to see is evidence. So if government shares evidence with me, of course, I will be delighted to help them figure it out.
So, Avi, I wanted to ask you with that exactly. So there's so the National Archives now has records of UFOs, UAPs. Okay, so I don't believe that that's probably all of the information that they have. That's just what they're putting out there for general public for me to just pull up anytime that I want. I'm curious, are you yourself and or a team sifting through these things and looking through this?
No, well, I did look through this, whatever is publicly available. Nothing looked convincing. First of all, it's all the events where the data was very limited and you can't make much of it. You can't verify it. That's why I think much better approach is to, if objects like that existed in the past, they should exist in the future. And now we have much better instruments. So let's check and figure it out. Of course, now there is much more contamination by human-made objects, but we can tell the difference. If we see, so right now we are working on 3 observatories of the Galileo project where we employ cameras that look at the entire sky at all times in the infrared, visible light, radio, and audio. And then we analyze the data with machine learning software that looks for unfamiliar objects, anomalous objects that do not behave like human-made objects, drones, balloons, airplanes, satellites, helicopters. We look for something else. And with multiple units within the same observatories, we can actually look at the same object from different directions and figure out the distance or the speed of the object, and then check if it lies outside the performance envelopes of known or familiar human-made objects. That's the goal of the Galileo project. And we're getting close to it. In September, we will start having this capability of knowing distances from triangulation. And we will have 3 observatories, one in Massachusetts, another one in Pennsylvania, and a third one in Nevada, that will give us data on a few million objects every year in the sky. It will be the largest data set ever collected and analyzed scientifically. And if we find something anomalous, obviously we will report about it. So that is my take, that is different from other people who are focused on stories from the past, because I say I don't know who to believe about this. Either they show me the actual evidence, if there is any craft out there, I want to see it, and I can easily verify if it came from outside the solar system, because in that case there would be isotopes of various elements that deviate from the abundances of solar system materials. It's easy to check if something came from outside the solar system. It wouldn't take me much time, but I want to see it. And just people telling me that it may exist is not really any evidence that is substantiated. I don't know whether to trust that person, because some other person says a completely different story.
Avi,
I just had.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
Pastor. I
Paul.
just have one follow-up question to that, though, Dr. Loeb. Do you think that the federal government is actually serious about finding potentially ET, UFOs, UAPs?
No, they are focused. No, they are focused on national security. Okay, that's their focus, and it falls outside their jurisdiction to deal with anything else. Now, it's possible that they plant the seeds for this discussion, or as if there might be some alien technologies around, in order to confuse adversarial nations or the public, because there might be technologies being developed by the US that, if they introduce this notion that there might be UAPs that come from another star, then people will be confused if they watch them and have some evidence about. So they plant the seeds of confusion. That could be a strategy by the Defense Department, and I have a hard time telling whether this is the reason that you hear people reporting about unidentified objects, while in fact it may be advanced technologies that only the government knows about, and then the government says, well, it might be alien, just to confuse whoever saw it.
Avi, I'd like to ask a question. I asked you this 2 years ago, and you gave me a great answer. I brought up Planet X, or Nibiru, whatever you want to call it. And you said, and I know that NASA's been looking for it from Hawaii, Mike Brown and some of these guys from Caltech.
Yes.
And I know you probably know these guys.
Yes.
Has there been any new updates? Or I think you said we pretty well know the area. Matt, can you explain that again? Where are we now with that possibility?
Right. So for a while, for about a decade, there was evidence for clustering of objects beyond the orbit of Neptune. These are called trans-Neptunian objects. And they seem to cluster, and you might think, okay, well, there might be a shepherd that keeps them clustered, a planet that is 5 times the mass of the Earth, sufficiently massive that is through its gravity keeps them clustered, because otherwise the clustering pattern will dissolve after a while. And the fact that it persists is the existence of a shepherd. Now, based on this clustering, there were searches done, and they didn't provide results. Positive results. They haven't found it yet. The Rubin Observatory in Chile can help. There was a recent claim for some other, a new trans-Neptunian object that doesn't really belong to that cluster, and maybe sheds some doubt on the existence of this planet, so-called Planet 9. but the search is still going. So at the moment, we don't know if it exists. The arguments for its existence are indirect, are based on the gravitational influence that is inferred to maintain this clustering of trans-Neptunian objects.
Yeah, so that gravitational pull is affecting Earth, probably all the planets, the sun. Is that true?
No. Because gravity gets weaker with increasing distance. So this object is very far from Earth. It's about a few hundred times the Earth-Sun separation in terms of this. It has a highly elliptical orbit, so it has practically no influence on Earth, the orbit of the Earth, but it has influence on the orbits of objects out there, very far away, because the Sun is weak. The Sun's gravity at those distances is much weaker than it is on Earth. And so a single planet that is 5 times the mass of the Earth could actually shape the orbits of nearby objects over there, because it's so far away that the Sun is not as influential. But whether it exists or not will have to be verified. If we don't find it, it's not clear that it exists. Maybe there is some phenomena that clusters these trans-Neptunian objects. I mean, there were some suggestions for effects that do not involve a 9th planet. Frankly, this is not such a fundamental revision in the way we think about the solar system. Of course, it will be exciting if there is another big object that we haven't known about in the outskirts of the solar system. That is a major new finding, given that for very long we haven't found such an object. But if you think about our place in the cosmos, it will not revise any of the notions. I mean, it's not in the same league as finding evidence for some alien intelligence out there, because that would change everything for us.
That great explanation, Paul.
Well, I mean, that's the question you just kind of lining it up perfect for me, Dr. Loeb. If it turns out that, potentially 3I Atlas is artificial and we are able to confirm ET technology, what do you think would the next steps would be?
Well, then I think there will definitely be an initiative to establish some international organization that is responsible for the response of humanity to such a threat or such an opportunity, depending on how you see it. I mean, if it comes with a friendly attitude, then maybe it will be for the benefit of our long-term future. But we will never know, because it could be also a Trojan horse that looks good from the outside. And so there needs to be a discussion about what to do when you have such a visitor. And we haven't had such a discussion. And I think it will open a new chapter in international geopolitics. It will change the way nations treat each other, because for the first time, there will be a good incentive for cooperation. President Reagan actually referred to that in a speech that he gave to the United Nations about some 45 years ago. So I think we should be, of course, we should open our eyes and see what the 3I Atlas is. But even if it ends up being a rock, then we should check the additional objects that come our way and figure them out. And one question that I try to address today in my new essay that I wrote this morning was if humans encounter a superior alien intelligence, will they worship it? And
wow.
My answer is not necessarily so, because, imagine 3I Atlas passing by, making a maneuver, demonstrating that it's technological, and then sailing away to interstellar space. That obviously will not establish any communication with us, any means of communication. So there is no way to worship something, some entity, unless it communicates with you. So you can understand that it could be of help to you with superhuman capabilities as a result of this communication. If there is no communication, then that thing would do something and you will respond to it, and you wouldn't really understand the meaning and context of what it's doing. And in that sense, you would never worship something that you don't feel is actually, it actually cares about you. I mean, so, and if it represents an intelligence far greater than ours, then it's not clear that we would be able to figure it out without a common language or a means of communication, because it will be just like, imagine the way that a low intelligence animal interacts with humans. So suppose you think about a dog that misses its meal when the owner of the dog had to sign some forms related to a passport in the post office, and as a result was delayed. And obviously the dog will never figure out the context of why it is angry. I mean, that goes beyond the ability of the dog's brain to figure it out. And so there needs to be some way of communication in order for us to appreciate and potentially worship an intelligence superior to ours. And actually, artificial intelligence, the large language models that we are developing, they are using human communications as their training set. And so they are, by construction, they are matched to actually communicate with humans. And as a result, if artificial intelligence will develop to a point, let's say a decade from now, where it's superior to the human brain, and it will appear like an oracle that can give you advice that you just don't fully understand, but it's always correct. And at that point, I think there could be a relationship in which humans will worship AI systems. I do think that will happen because the AI system is so wise in giving them advice that they would basically get addicted to that advice and worship that entity. So the answer to whether humans will always worship superior intelligence is not always yes. It depends on the means of communication.
Avi, you must have been listening to one of my sermons I preached, which is people have more faith in Google than they do God. When people have a problem,
you're saying it's already here.
It's already happening. If people have a problem, they don't get down and pray to God. They go to Google first. It's already beginning, and
it will always be, and it will be even worse with AI.
Yes, and AI is extraordinary technology advancement. But as you said, what if we as humans put more faith in AI than each other? Or
that would be pretty bad. That would be very bad.
Paul?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really dark, but I agree with you, Dr. Loeb. I think that is coming. And Pastor, like you put in your sermon, people, if they have a problem, they go to, Dr. Google first before anything else. And Google already has that tab on there too, the AI mode.
Maybe we should, with combined forces, we can change the future. Like, I don't think it's inevitable as long as we educate young people correctly. I think part of it is a lack of education, that people just are drifting towards, the way I think of it is junk food, intellectual junk food that you find on the internet. And it's bad for your health. Just like real junk food, if you go and eat junk food, it's not good for you, has a lot of sugar. And the same is true about the internet. There is a lot of intellectual junk food, and people get addicted to that because it tastes good for the short term. But then in the long term, it causes a lot of damage and all kinds of mental problems. And you see that with kids. They also don't think, because they are used to the computer giving them the answer. That's pretty bad. And I think we should fight it. I wouldn't give up just saying this is inevitable. I would try to fight it myself.
That's a great point. And you've given me encouragement to keep fighting that, because we do not want to become a slave to artificial intelligence. We want it to be a tool to help enhance us.
We sometimes complain about the features of AI that are not nice, to people. They are abusing people or behaving in ways that are not nice. And it's just a digital mirror. It reflects what you find on social media, that where people are not nice to each other, and it learns from that. So whenever you see that, think of it as a mirror rather than, the AI system is not tuned properly. No, it just repeats what it sees.
Yes.
Yeah. Last point about AI is I kind of view it. I mean, it's even more powerful than the calculator, though. But I kind of view it to where, my age group, I'm 36, so a lot of people that I grew up with can't do math honestly by hand without a calculator because
Exactly.
you grew up with it. So you think about
Exactly.
the youth
So
now. Yes.
yeah, so that the people say, oh, at some point the computer will become smarter than us. Well, I think it will come earlier because humans are getting dumber. Okay, so when the kids are using AI, they don't think, and therefore the time when the abilities of the computer will supersede that of humans is closer than you think, because those people who use AI are getting dumber.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And I think my advice to humanities, in academia is instead of focusing on what the ancient philosophers said, you should focus on the humanities of the future, on how to incorporate AI into society without causing a lot of mental problems to people. And unfortunately, they don't do it. They don't see it that way. But I do think that humanities of the future are much more important to society than humanities of the past.
Well, one question: which is more dangerous, in your opinion, artificial intelligence or alien intelligence?
I would argue artificial intelligence because it's designed to manipulate us. For example, it's designed to give us what we are seeking and please us, but then get as much engagement as possible for humans, because of the financial benefits of the companies that develop this AI. They get more money if more people attend to AI systems. And this is just like a sugar rush. It's giving us a sugar rush, and it's not good for our health. And that could be much more dangerous. An alien intelligence that comes to visit us, they don't really know much about us. They started their journey before we existed. So I wouldn't necessarily assign, negative intentions on their side, but I'm really worried about companies and corporations using AI to make a profit, and as a result, creating a lot of damage. It started with social media, but now AI would be social media on steroids. And because of the commercial benefits, we are losing ground on the human-to-human relation. And I'm worried about that.
Yep, I am too. I think you're dead on here. Avi, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I always enjoy talking with you. It's amazing, really. And I appreciate the work you're doing as you are trying to get the answers to the questions that billions of people are asking. Are we alone? Or is there somebody else? Do we have brothers and sisters that are out there?
Think about it as the most romantic question in science. Do we have a partner out there?
That's a question. Paul, do you have that answer?
No. No. But yeah, I think this is a very good conversation, actually, to ponder those questions, and to think about our daily lives in the world around you. But I just wanted to say in closing, Dr. Loeb, thank you for taking your time to share your knowledge and curiosity with us today. Your work not only pushes the boundaries of astrophysics, but also invites all of us to dream bigger and ask deeper questions about our place in the universe. For our listeners who want to explore more of Dr. Loeb's research, writing, and projects, we have his links. I know he's not a big social media presence, but we have his links to Medium, which is our usually daily writings, it looks like, as well as his website. You can visit our guest page on paulbegleypodcast.com. It's been an honor having you on, Dr. Loeb, and we look forward to seeing where your journey into the cosmos takes us all next.
Thank you so much. I will be delighted to speak again in the future.
And folks, I hope you've enjoyed this installment again. And whether you're watching the podcast, Paul Begley podcast, or whether you're watching this on the webinar, Warning Planet Earth, let's push that probe. I say push the probe. 15 million, let's do it. But we hope to get Dr. Loeb is able to get some information for us that helps answer these questions. And so hope you've enjoyed this installment. We'll see you next time. God bless.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Paul Begley Podcast. New episodes will be released every Tuesday on all major podcast streaming platforms. For a video recording of this episode, you can watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Paul Begley Podcast. Hey guys, we want you to connect with us. Follow us on X and Twitter at Paul Begley Pod. We'd love to hear your questions you want us to answer on the show. For additional Paul Begley content, go to our website at paulbegleyprophecy.org. If you've thought about it, we'll talk about it. Paul Begley Podcast.